Good morning, folks. Thank you for joining us for this totally awesome webinar with Tommy Hyde from the Department of Economic and Community Development. We are very happy to have him here with us. He's been an amazing resource. He answers all of our questions in a very timely manner and very thoroughly, and has been so far 100% accurate, which is a good thing. Because as you all know, there's information flying everywhere, some of it good, some of it bad. The reason for having this webinar today was to answer some of those really very detailed questions that people have, both as potential customers to these businesses and also as business owners. I think we're all very interested to know about future phases, where we are now, where we might be going over the summer. The big question, of course, is when the emergency goes away, and of course we don't have a crystal ball. But what I'm going to do is turn it over to Tommy. You can go ahead and give us your overview, maybe tell us what you do at the DECD and where we kind of stand with this whole process. So, all yours.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Steve, for helping set this up, and to everyone who's joining today. Again, as Diane said, my name is Tommy Hyde, and I work for the State Department of Economic and Community Development as the Director of Government Affairs and Special Projects. So basically, leading up to this virus, I worked really closely with the local legislature, advocating on behalf of small businesses and legislation to kind of, ease some of the burdens. We were working on new incentive programs. And basically, since last year, that's all I've been doing up until, I forgot now, I think sometime in March, where all of a sudden everything stopped and the entire focus changed. And right from the beginning, I've been working very closely with my commissioner kind of over the past 2 months as our department has been focused on this virus. We created the essential, non-essential business list and designation. We worked with DPH to come up with guidance for essential businesses and safe store rules. And then I'm sure many of you know, and hopefully some of you have been able to take advantage of our bridge loan program that, knock on wood, is supposed to be finalizing and distributing all the money by the end of this week. One of the things really early on that we were able to do, I think, for a couple reasons. One, we are a small state, and it was the ability not to just uniformly shut down everything when this started really happening. So unlike New York, which was the epicenter, they kind of brought everything to a grinding halt, Massachusetts to some extent as well. We actually continued to allow all manufacturing across the state. We continued to allow all construction, and we actually never stopped real estate, along with a host of other industries. That was really good foresight on my commissioner's part to allow as much as we possibly could to stay open. And now, as many of you know, and I've seen, yesterday and previous days over the news, we just opened up phase 1. And so far, I believe I saw something that, I know it's only a day, but it's looking good. And then yesterday, we also announced phase 2. And, for those of you who might not know, phase 1 consists of offices, even though we're allowing people to still work from home. Outdoor dining, which me and my girlfriend enjoyed yesterday for the first time. We couldn't wait. It was fantastic. We live in the Colt building in Hartford, and they actually have a brewery on our first floor. So we went out to dinner last night. It was fantastic. Outdoor zoos and museums, outdoor recreation with less than 5 people, who just last night, the ability to self-certify under outdoor recreation came online for folks on the call who were looking for that. On Tuesday, the entire state system shut down. We're still trying to figure out what that was, but it pushed everything back. So as of, last night, I think around 6 p.m., you can self-certify as outdoor recreation. And then, as I was joking with Steve and Diane earlier, it was supposed to be hair salons. I'm actually supposed to be at a haircut appointment right now. I typically don't have a beard, but decided to grow it out, and I was supposed to shave it tonight, but I'm going to let it ride until June 2nd when my next haircut appointment is. So that's where we are. And then again, yesterday, I'm sure many of you guys tuned in to Governor Lamont's press conference, or, picked up the newspaper and read about it today to just talk about kind of phase 2 and phase 3. At a very high level, we are going to allow accommodation in some indoor restaurant activity, although no bars. Gym, fitness, and sports clubs are going to be allowed open. There will be some kind of capacity limits around that. currently, if you do own kind of a smaller boutique fitness operation, you have the ability to do one-on-one outdoor training, and you would just go on our website and self-certify under outdoor recreation for that. We're going to allow outdoor arts, entertainment, and events. Again, there will be a capacity limit on some of this stuff. It's not just going to be wide open and a free-for-all. I believe the governor said 50 people yesterday, but I've just gotten that in email today versus verifying it, so I'm not entirely sure. Outdoor amusement parks, we've actually been in several conversations with them to talk about what a reopening would look like. And again, there's going to be a lot of capacity limits to these stuff. So you should all be aware of that up front. And then, movie theaters, bowling alleys, social clubs, and then all museums, zoos, and aquariums. And then as for phase 3, I think, many of you, including myself, will be happy to know that we are bringing bars back at that phase. And there has been some kind of issues out there. Well, if I'm only a bar, can I still open up? And the answer is yes, to the extent that you can provide food. And we can get into a little bit more details on that if people have questions on that. But then we're also going to see kind of phase 3 indoor event spaces and venues, indoor amusement parks and arcades, and then, outdoor events that are will allow a larger capacity. So round numbers, I'm not saying this is 100% accurate, but if we're allowing 50 in phase 1, you could expect some sort of addition to that number in phase 2. So, I'll stop there. I'm sure many of you have questions. I know Diane has a lot for me, so maybe we can jump into that.
Thank you very much, Tommy. We're going to go through these pretty quickly because most of these, I think, at this point are simple. If someone comes into my business without a mask and tell me they cannot wear one because they have a medical condition, is it okay for them to be there with social distancing, or do I have to make them leave? My attorney says I have to be careful telling someone with a medical condition I cannot serve them.
Yeah, so for restaurant owners, the governor did come out on the new on one of the press conferences the other day and say, if it's a restaurant, so I think one of the things here is, potentially if you're an essential business, that might be the case. But I think a restaurant, and the way my commissioner said, no shoes, no shirt, no service. If they are not wearing a mask, and one, your employees are not going to be comfortable with that, and then two, your other customers are not going to be comfortable with that, you are allowed to refuse them from coming into your restaurant for not wearing a mask.
Okay, is it just for restaurants or for any of the non-essential businesses?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm trying to think of another example, of what that would look like. I know
I can give you one. So let's say an 80-year-old lady only goes to the hair salon to have her hair done, but she has, breathing condition, she has COPD, and she can't wear a mask. Can she go and have her hair done?
I don't believe so. The nature of the salon is very close contact, and the health team is, very insistent on everyone wearing masks all the time. I'm sure many of you saw that, if you're a salon, if you're a hairdresser or a barber, you also have to wear the face shield. And, the other thing is that salon, that person cutting your hair would have to be comfortable with that. So, if you walk into a salon and the person cutting your hair is not comfortable cutting your hair without a mask on, then they wouldn't have to cut your hair at that time. If they are comfortable, I'll have to get back to you on whether or not that would be allowed. But I believe masks are strictly enforced in barber shops and hair salons. Okay.
And so we'll get back. I'll send everybody an updated answer to that. If you have a question, please put it into the chat. You can use question and answers too, but please put it out in the chat so we can throw that out there. Can you take your mask off to eat at a restaurant?
Yes, and drink. So the thought behind restaurant is if you're waiting in line to get seated, as you're walking through the restaurant, you should have a mask on. When you sit down at the table, to the extent you can, you should be keeping that mask on. The drink comes over or the food, it's supposed to be food and drink at the same time or first, but, at that point you can take it off. But if you stand up to go use a restroom, you should put that mask back on. If you stand up to throw something away, you should put that mask back on. If anytime you're moving, and, the servers out there, they have a tough job and they're working, and I think many of them would appreciate you putting that mask back on when they come over and talk to you and take your order as well. Or just when they stop by and say hi. So, be courteous to your servers as well, but they obviously have a tough job. They'll be wearing masks this entire time as well.
Okay, so instead of having tables 6 feet apart, can I just put up plexiglass walls between the tables in my restaurant? I saw a restaurant doing this on TV.
Indoors or outdoors? Indoors isn't allowed, so I guess that question wouldn't be relevant here. That's a good one. I mean, you know, I guess part of it is, I mean, I'm just trying to think through that logistically. So I guess it would almost be like you would have like booths set up outside. I don't have a good answer for that. I'm assuming it would be okay, but I can follow up. We do, you know, encourage folks to put up separators in barbershops and hair salons if need be. And it's definitely, you know, to the extent you want to do that, it is the best practice, I would say. But I'm not sure if there's wiggle room on the 6 foot, because the issue there is also, you know, waiters need to move around, other people need to move around. So unless you're completely, I mean, I guess you could do it in some areas, but you know, anywhere where people are walking, they have to, you know, there has to be that 6 feet. So I will find that out and get back to you with a straight answer.
Okay, and so the cousin to that question is, can I install a plexiglass wall between my hair dryers and washing sinks in my salon? They're not 6 feet apart. Can I put up the plexiglass barriers to get away from the 6 foot requirement?
I believe that's addressed in our guidance, and I believe it does allow you to do that. If it's not in the guidance, I'll double check after the call, but I believe the guidance does allow you to install kind of barriers where to, you know, ensure safety.
Okay, I have to be honest, we'll get back to everybody on that, because some of the health department webinars I've been on, they are saying the installation of the barriers does not prevent the 6 foot requirement. So we'll double check on that and get back to everybody.
Okay? Yeah, I mean, the health department would know some of this better than I would probably, but yeah, so we'll find out both that for hair salons and restaurants. Okay.
Are masks required to be worn by people in outdoor museums?
It depends on the space. Well, first of all, it depends on the museum, right? I mean, you know, if it's it's kind of hard to, like, there's not really a whole lot of outdoor museums out there. I think there's one in Mystic. You know, the rule of thumb is anytime you're in a public place and you can't maintain social distancing, you should wear a mask. So if you're in an outdoor museum and you're the only one there and there's no one else around, I would say it'd be okay to take it off. But to the extent you're walking by people, you know, you're coming close, you know, there's other people, there's children running around, then no, you wouldn't be able to take it off.
Okay. And I think we kind of answered the other question. Is that if you're sitting at a restaurant and you're not eating, you should have your mask on at all times, moving around, doing everything. You should have a mask on unless you take it off just to eat. Correct? And
the mask, as you all know, it's more to protect the people around you than to protect yourself. It's stopping the, you know, saliva and droplets from coming out and other people catching it. So it's really just a courtesy to everyone around you to wear that mask.
Okay, so this question comes from a CrossFit gym owner. Can you please clarify the outdoor recreation guidelines and self-certifying as an outdoor recreation and capacity? So I saw on the news a gym was doing outside classes of 10 plus people with a coach.
Yeah, so my email inbox blew up yesterday. I believe it was in Colchester. And from my understanding, somehow the mayor thought potentially, I'm not sure if it was the mayor, but someone had given them approval to do that. The state guidance is you cannot do that. At this time, outdoor recreation, we have a carve out for one-on-one outdoor training. So to the extent there's, you know, one trainer and one trainee outside doing fitness, that would be allowed. You know, if you have, you know, 3 trainers and 3 trainees outside doing fitness, that would be allowed. Obviously, everyone needs to be socially distanced, and, you know, to the extent you could get even further than that, that would be encouraged. But there should be no one trainer to a group of 10 classes at this time. And I saw the article, again, my inbox blew up. They're not supposed to be doing that, and that is not allowed at this time. We are opening up gyms in phase 2. And we'll be working over the next, 7 to 10 days to come out with guidance on what that'll look like.
So I mean, we got a lot of questions with the beach stuff, and the swimming and things like, I think overall, if you're going to be outside anywhere, outside of your home, you need to stay 6 feet away from everybody. You should wear a mask if there's other people around you at all times,
Yep.
no matter what you're doing, unless of course you have to actually put food into your mouth. But you know, the use of the mask should be consistent everywhere, and staying 6 feet away from people should be everywhere as much as possible. Would you say that's
Yeah,
a
and
good
I know
rule of thumb?
absolutely, and I know the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, they came out with rules on beaches today, I believe. So you should definitely, I haven't seen them yet, but you should definitely visit their website. They also created an interactive feature that will allow you to go on and check capacity at certain state parks. So you know whether or not it's full before you load up the family in the car and drive to the park. Obviously, it's going to be super important this weekend being Memorial Day. Those parks fill up very quickly, and they are not going to be full capacity, just to give everyone a heads up. So there's going to be reduced capacity, and then there's a bunch of other best practices and guidelines that you'll be able to find on DEEP's website.
Okay, here's another question. I'm a dental hygienist and a restaurant owner. Where is the thinking about my restaurant that I can only be able to have 50% capacity? Can't get my hair or nails done, but elective teeth cleaning at the dentist's office is okay where there's blood and spit everywhere. So I guess they're saying is, how do we allow routine dental work with spit, but not having my hair or my nails done?
Yeah, so, important clarification, the state never really deemed, or dentist offices have been essential since the very beginning in the state. I believe guidance came out through some of the national associations when this was early on and said, no, only emergency procedures should be happening at this time. And then around May 20th, we started getting inundated with emails from dental hygienists about the topic. I know this has not been in my area. Again, I'm Department of Economic and Community Development. Department of Public Health, they have been, engaging in conversations with the Dentist Association and the Dental Hygienist Association, and they came out with rules and best practices for that industry as well. So I've not seen those yet. I believe they came out late last week, so I don't have a great answer for you. But yeah, so I know they work directly with industry to come up with guidelines and procedures to keep everyone safe, similar to what we've done with all the other industries allowed to open at this time.
I think it's really important for people to understand that there's guidelines coming from multiple sources and they all apply. One doesn't undo the other. So you have federal guidelines from the federal government, you have state guidelines from the DECD, you have CDC guidelines, OSHA guidelines, Department of Health guidelines, and then industry specific guidelines. So you need to make sure you go and get all of them and are complying with all of them. You are from the DECD, that's just one set of these. So what the Department of Public Health does in Connecticut or what DEEP says in Connecticut is not your department, although you still work for the same state government.
Right.
But people need to understand the Department of Economic Development, DECD, where you're coming from, are those industry-specific guidelines, which is what you're the expert on. So Department of Health and CDC, stuff like that, isn't it above and beyond in addition, correct?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, we do work closely with public health. We work closely with DEEP, Campgrounds. I work closely with DEEP and public health on, believe it or not. I don't have a bandwidth for everything, and I know that the dentist issue was squarely handled in the Department of Public Health. So I just don't have a great working knowledge of those conversations and how they happened and how that guidance was created.
Right, and another comment made on that was that's like CDC, Department of Health, other places come out with what are called recommendations, not necessarily mandates. Right. I would say this, if the Department of Health, CDC, or OSHA makes a recommendation, I would do it. Because, I mean, hard to defend yourself if something happens when you do something that is outside of a recommendation by CDC, OSHA, or anything like that. So it may not be called mandatory, but for the most part, I think people need to understand it's significant. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe it was recommendations from the CDC and the association which had them all stop this in the first place. And the state, again, the state never stepped in and said, hey, you cannot open your dental office. You have to only do elective procedures. It was at the recommendation of the CDC and these other organizations that dentist office stopped what they were doing and closed down shop and only did emergency services.
Lori says, I operate a nonprofit that has docents 65 years and over. Can they still volunteer? I'm hearing conflicting opinions. Are they there?
So look, again, the recommendation, if you're a 65 or older, if you're a high risk individual, you should stay home at this time. I mean, the organization and the individual have to be comfortable with that. We have manufacturers who have been going this entire time, and we know that manufacturing is an aging workforce. And there are guys who still get up every day and go into work because that's what they love and that's what they want to do. So, the recommendation is stay home and you shouldn't be out. But if you'd like to go out and you'd like to do your job, then you should have the ability to do that. With a full and complete understanding of the risks that, with the risks that you're facing by doing that.
Next question is, I was looking through the guidelines and I don't see anywhere that I am required to put in a plexiglass wall between my cash register and my customer. If I'm a small business and this is going to be difficult or the area is difficult to install such a thing, do I have to do that or just keep my social distancing?
I'd have to double check the rules. I believe it is mandatory. It's mandatory for most of stores that have been essential this entire time. The other thing is, it doesn't have to be a hard piece of plexiglass. I walked into a convenience store the other day. They had 2 strings hanging from the ceiling and a piece of plastic that with, a weight at the bottom, and that was their plexiglass shield. Probably cost them all of $5 at the local Home Depot. So, you don't have to think about, I know when you walk into Stop and Shop, they got these plexiglass shields and they're screwed in. It doesn't have to be that. It can be a little bit more creative, easier, and cheaper to get done.
Okay, good. That answers the second question, which is plexiglass now is in shortage and it's becoming very expensive. And so can we use alternative methods? Yes, you can. Okay.
Yep.
What exactly does a contactless payment mean?
So it could mean a lot. I have an iPhone, so sometimes, well, actually a lot more now. I go to the grocery store. Instead of swiping your credit card or inserting your credit card and typing numbers, you could double click your phone, and it'll actually, it verifies you and it allows for you to pay just like that. Yesterday, actually at the restaurant my girlfriend and I went to, they actually brought over a receipt. And, typically like any other restaurant, they bring the receipt in the little book, and on the bottom of the receipt was just a barcode. I took out my phone, you take a picture of the barcode, you type your credit card information in, and you pay right there. So there are a lot of different, there's things called Venmo where you can actually send money to someone else through your phone. So there's a lot of different ways out there. Obviously, you have to be somewhat savvy with the phone to understand how to do that. And again, I believe these are encouraged to the most extent possible. If you're not super comfortable, you can still pay with cash, but wherever possible, you should try to be contactless payment. And restaurants understand there's a clientele out there that aren't comfortable with this, and I doubt they're going to refuse you or say the only way to pay is with contact payments. It's just highly encouraged.
Okay, so the next question was, can I still pay with cash? Can I still accept cash payments? And you said yes.
Yes.
Okay. Does a restaurant certified food protection manager have to be the administrator, as it says in the rules, or can it be the owner of the restaurant who doesn't have that certification? Does it matter who the administrator is?
I don't think, yeah. So, so the restaurant certifies itself. I believe that should be the owner because they're responsible for everything. So the owner of the restaurant, when they self-certify, they're basically saying, I understand the rules that we have created and I plan to follow them. The other person, that can really be anyone. Their job though is to make sure that all these rules and best practices are being implemented. So it doesn't have to be the same person, I guess, but the owner has to have an understanding that he is responsible for this, and that's what the certification is. And then that other person, whether it's the owner or not, is really responsible for implementing all of these best practices.
Okay, a couple questions on contact tracing. When will there be more information on that? How do I find out if a customer that came in was sick so I can tell my employees? Are there any mandates on this process? Like, do I have to
Yeah.
get name and phone numbers of my customers who come into my business? So I think those are like.
No, so you don't. Yeah, so a couple things, and I'm not, this is squarely in the Department of Public Health, so I have not a good answer for a lot of these. What I will say is you're supposed to keep a log of your employees. So to the extent someone does get sick and we find out they're in your store, in your restaurant, people can get notified. I've not seen anything where, and I think it would be kind of impractical to collect names and phone numbers of every single person who walked into your establishment. That, to my knowledge, that is not a requirement at all. The other stuff, when will the updates come, how it works, you know, et cetera, I have no good working knowledge of that.
Okay, so we'll follow up with everybody because that's coming from DPH, you're saying, right? Public Health?
That's DPH, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. The pictures that are in the guidelines says that I have to put a hand sanitizer outside of my door, but this will probably get stolen in about 5 seconds. Can I have it inside my building rather than outside the door?
Yeah, and I think the guidance says where possible for hand sanitizer. So we know that, you know, everything's in short supply right now. These are best practices, and we understand if you can't get the hand sanitizer or you're afraid, you know, that it's going to get stolen, right inside, I think is a fine substitute. But the message is here: if you can get them, they should absolutely be there. But you know, if you can't for whatever reason, it's okay, and you're not going to get in trouble for it.
This guidelines say signage has to be in multiple languages. Is English and Spanish okay, or how many is multiple?
So I think that is referring to for your employees specifically. So to the extent, you know, if all your employees speak English and the signage is just for your employees, English would be fine. If you have, you know, some folks that only speak Spanish, you should have Spanish. And so I think for when it's with your employees, you know, you have to be accommodating to what their languages are that they speak.
Okay. My employees can each have their own face masks that cover their nose and mouth, take them home and wash them and then wear them again. I don't have to actually supply medical face masks to each of them, do I?
You don't. So you have to supply face masks to them. Kind of how that works and who washes them, you know, that's something we're going to leave between you and your employees. You do have to supply them. They do not have to be medical grade, but you do have to supply them. Okay.
I was told that we had to disinfect the bathrooms after every single use. Is this correct?
No, in the verbiage on this on the recommendations is, I think I'm forgetting the exact verbiage, but basically you should base it off use. So, you know, if you're a restaurant and, you know, you have a rush at your lunch and, you know, 15, 20 people are using your bathroom, does it make sense to clean that every half an hour? Yes. But after that rush is over and, you know, between 2 and 4 o'clock, no one's using it, do you have to clean it then if no one has actually used it? No. So we do provide a lot of flexibility in that, with the understanding that when it's busy and when a lot of people are using it, then you need to step up your cleaning routine. But if it's slow and not a lot of people or no one's using it, then you wouldn't have to just clean it every hour regardless.
Okay. This is another 6-foot question. So in my hair salon, you have the posts and then the chairs. Is the 6 feet between them from post to post or from the chair to chair? So I think the answer is from chair to chair, right? It's between people. The 6 feet.
I'm not familiar with the post is.
So the chair has like the post that comes up that it's sitting on, and then you have the chair on top of like the post that it sits on.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I mean, it should be, so for restaurants, it's the 2 closest points. So when you think about it for a restaurant, if you have a person sitting down in a chair and behind them is another person sitting down in their chair, the 6 feet should be chair to chair.
Yeah.
So I think it's similar for hair salons.
And for any other business, it's between people. It's
correct.
Not between.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Do I have to test my employees every shift, or do they take their own temperatures and self-report?
So this is, yeah, so you do not need to, you know, you do not need to actually take your employee's temperature. You know, it's a best practice. You know, you don't have to physically do it. You can encourage them to do it from home if they want, but it is a best practice, and it's just helpful to know anything over, I think, 100.4, they should be staying home. But you know, you don't have to physically test your employee every single shift.
Okay. If my employee says that they are sick and I send them home, do I have to pay their wages while they are out? I think that's
That's a Department of Labor question.
Labor.
I believe so. There's the federal government passed the stimulus act that allows up to 2-week paid sick leave for most employees in most businesses. I'm not an expert on that, but from my understanding, if they're sick and with COVID and they're home for 2 weeks, the federal government would help and step in. If they go home, halfway through their shift and they show up the next day, I don't have a good answer for that, to be honest with you, because that's more of the Department of Labor. And I would assume, on a regular day, if your employee was sick and they left early, and if you paid them, you would. If you didn't pay them, then you wouldn't. I think for an extended period of time, if they're out with something like COVID-19, there are a federal program to help step in and cover the cost there.
So if I'm a restaurant and I'm doing outdoor seating and I have the area kind of fenced off, do I have to have 2 entrances, or is only one entrance okay? Do I have to have 2 separate entrances, entrance and exit?
Again, I think that's encouraged. I don't think it's necessary, and we know just geographically it's not going to make sense for all restaurants to do that. So to the extent you can accommodate it, you should do everything in your power to do it. But if you can't and it doesn't make sense, it is okay. Granted, you're going to have to understand if there's a line waiting outside, that line should be socially distanced far enough so as people are leaving, there's not that 6 foot that 6 foot gap is maintained. So as long as you're kind of setting up in a way that allows you to maintain that 6 feet as people are coming in and leaving, that would be allowed.
Okay. A similar question. My bathrooms are in a small hallway and they're not 6 feet wide. So if someone's going towards the bathroom, someone's coming away from the bathroom, is this going to be a problem, or do we just wear masks and social distance as much as possible?
Exactly. Some of these are very detailed and specific questions, which I understand you guys as owners, are very concerned about. The answer is that's why you're wearing the mask, because we know as you're walking around, you're not always going to be able to keep 6 feet away, just like if you're in a retail establishment or the supermarket or the Home Depot. So, wear the mask and do the best you can. And to be honest, you could have a kind of a holding pattern and put clearly marked, lines where people should wait until that bathroom is open. But obviously having a men's and a women's room, there might be issues there. But,
right.
Again, do your best to do it, to get it figured out and to have a good game plan. But we understand it's not going to be perfect across the board.
So if that was me, I would take that hallway, whatever it is, and put a piece of tape down the middle of the floor with an arrow going to the bathrooms and away from the bathrooms to kind of keep people at least on separate sides and kind of do that sort of thing.
Yeah, and if it's one bathroom, there should be a space far enough back for people waiting and allow the person to come out before the next person goes in.
And again, I think as long as you're doing as best as you can, this next question is one of those. You do the best that you can, but you can't control everything. So it's supposed to be 6 feet between customers in my restaurants from their chair to chair. But what if somebody comes in and they're really big, or if they push their chair back? Am I going to get closed down because of it? I think as long as the rest of the chairs and things in your restaurant are appropriate, right? You've done your best.
Yeah, and this is going to be very, this is all going to be locally enforced. And listen, if something happens, and whether it's the police or the public health and they show up, hopefully, and the guidance hopefully will be, do whatever you can to mitigate the situation. So if that's the case and someone has a huge issue and you might have to move it a little bit, you might have to move it. But I don't think they're just going to come in and shut you down for a scenario like the one just described.
So my suggestion is, if you open up a restaurant outside like that and somebody, some policing force shows up at your business with a tape measure and is going to try to shut you down for an inch or two, that they should contact someone about that. Well, call Tommy.
Yeah, there you go.
I honestly believe in dealing with as many communities as we have through this process, that the Department of Health and the town policing agents really want businesses to open up. I mean, these are their neighbors, their friends, their family members. They want them to open up, but they also want safety. So as long as you're doing your best to follow the guidelines within your ability, I do absolutely believe that you'll be fine. I will. And
many of them probably go to those establishments too and enjoy meals there as well. So yeah, I think as long as everyone's trying their best, hopefully there's always bad actors out there, and there's not a whole lot you can do to prevent them, but absolutely.
Do you want to take a side note and talk about the casinos? So I have somebody here that's with the HR department, and they feel that they're following all the guidelines and doing cleaning and everything is appropriate, and they want to open up. They don't understand where the governor is coming from. Are you able to talk about that?
You know, those conversations are way above my pay grade between the governor and the casinos. I will not weigh in on that just because I have no knowledge of those discussions. Only what I read in the newspaper, see on the news, like everybody else.
Okay. So you can I have more than one stylist in my salon as long as they're able to work 6 feet apart? I think.
Yeah, 50% capacity. So, you know, you can have up to 50% capacity in your salon.
The other question that goes along with that is, there's a couple in a row here. So if I'm a hairstylist and can I have more than one customer for me in the place at a time? So for example, can I have somebody come in and I cut them and I stick them under a blow dryer, and then I have my second customer come in, I've cleaned in between, but I'm doing hair color on her, so she needs to sit for 20 minutes over there. And then I have a third customer that comes in and you know, whatever. Can I have more than one customer for me at a time? Because with some of these procedures, there's time in between.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think this is, I looked, I don't believe this is, you know, specifically addressed in the guidance. What I will say is, you know, you do need to clean and disinfect between every single appointment. So, and I get my haircut at a barber, you know, I'm in and out in 30 minutes. So I don't have a whole great working knowledge of this, but, you know, if someone comes in and they sit down and they have to be in the blow dryer, you know, and you're under the 50% capacity, I believe that would be okay. You know, you don't want to go over the 50% capacity. You want to make sure everyone is socially distanced at all times. People aren't bumping into each other and running around. And, you know, everything needs to be cleaned. And I know it's going to take some time to clean. So to the extent the timing and of all that can work out, I think it would be allowed. Okay.
It also says that to launder my capes. Do I actually have to put them in the washing machine after every use and clean them, or can I just spray them with disinfectant? The capes, you know, the capes that people wear?
If it says launder, then, you know, launder to me means put it in the laundry. Okay. And I believe it says that. If it doesn't specifically say that, if it says disinfect them, then you would be able to disinfect them.
Okay. Can customers bring their own books and things in to read? We know we can't have magazines on the table, but can they bring their own in and read while they're waiting?
Yeah, and you know, part of this is more of the shared materials, right? So we don't want the same person coming in, and they shouldn't because the waiting rooms are closed. But you know, the example you just gave, where a woman may be sitting in a chair having her hair dry for an extended period of time. Yes, what we don't want is you bringing in a jacket, a purse, a water bottle. You know, we're trying to limit the amount of stuff you're bringing in at all times. But so if you want to walk in with a book, that would be allowed. Granted, you're not kind of filling up a whole ton of space with everything else that you have.
Okay. This is controversial. Do stylists have to wear a face shields at all times, even when they're not using chemicals?
Yes. It was the public health team, you know, they absolutely want folks wearing a face shield at all times.
And if they are using chemicals, do they have to wear eye protection in addition to the face mask, in addition to the shield?
So I'm not, so I mean, I don't know the current rules about wearing eye protection. What I will say is, you know, if you're wearing goggles, if you have to wear, I guess, goggles for doing that, where, you know, it's basically cutting off the circulation between your eyes, then you should probably wear that because we know the face mask isn't airtight. But if you're just putting on a pair of safety glasses every time when you go to do that, I think a shield would be sufficient enough to cover that.
There's a couple of people here that are not in any of these specific industries, but they want to know, can they do things outdoors? And one is a photographer. So can I do outside photography shoots as long as it's no more than 5 people, social distancing, and face masks?
Yep, that's actually been allowed the entire time. We never, anything outdoors, you know, we're highly encouraging, but photography outdoors where socially distancing can't take place, that's always been allowed.
Okay, so anything outside as long as, okay.
Well, I don't want to say anything, but photography would be allowed, yeah. Okay.
So this question, I know you and I have talked about it by 100 times, but if my family has more than 5 people, can we all go out to dinner together?
Yeah, and so if you're a family unit and you're living together, then yes, you would be able to go out to dinner. One of the issues you're going to run into, though, if you know, 6, I can see, but you know, some of these restaurants, because of the way they're set up, they just might not have enough tables to accommodate you, or big enough to fit maybe more than 6. I think 6 or 7, I mean, that's a pretty big family to walk into a restaurant with. And again, they might not have a table big enough, but I think anything after 7, you should really think about. And again, I'm not sure if there's many families out there with more than 7 people. Yeah, or just sit at 2 different tables. The other thing. Yeah.
Okay. Does that also apply to going to the beach? It says you can't be in groups of more than 5, but if your family's 6 or 7, can you all sit on the same blanket?
Yeah. Again, you know, if you're out there with 10 people, though, you're going to draw some, you know, people are going to have concerns about that. And that's when you might get a ranger to come over. But again, to the extent it looks like you guys are all in a family living together. And I understand, you know, some families decided to shelter in place together. So you might have the girlfriend or the boyfriend or the husband and their kids. You know, some of that's going to be worked out on a one-on-one basis. Okay.
Another question is, so in my salon, I sell product. Can somebody come in to buy that hair care product that they need? And let me throw in addition to that is, so right now museums are outdoors, but could somebody come into the gift shop and buy something in the gift shop as a retail?
Yeah. So the answer is, and I guess there are some hair products that you're not allowed to sell. So if you were allowed to sell something before out of your salon, and you know, obviously it's not open now, you would be able to open that up as a retail establishment following all the retail rules, and that would be allowed. Going forward, I think, you know, when you have a salon that's going on and it's a random person, maybe that's not getting their haircut but needs something, you know, we would encourage you to just do curbside pickup with those products. Again, you got to stay under 50% capacity. You want to be restricting access to the most extent possible. So, you know, if you can do curbside pickup when your salon's kind of fully functioning and going, we would encourage that. And same thing for museums. You know, some of these museums, you know, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for them to open up just for a gift shop, and they're letting people walk around their grounds regardless. But the second you open up, you know, that museum as a gift shop, then you're kind of responsible for everything else that's going on the outside.
And that gift shop, if you're considering it retail, has to follow all the retail guidelines.
Correct. Yes.
So a couple of these questions should be easy to answer. We can talk about them. The private campgrounds, and so we have public campgrounds and private campgrounds. You want to just talk in general about them, because that'll probably answer the next 6 questions.
Yeah. So campgrounds have always been allowed to open for essential workers, folks who own the site at their campground and pay taxes, and then long-term leaseholders. I believe it was originally 6 months or over. Starting yesterday, campgrounds are allowed to open up for weekend and transient visitors. And those are only allowed to open up at 50% capacity, like every other business we're allowing. So absolutely, you know, if you have a reservation to go camping this weekend, whether it's a tent, the other restriction originally was no public restrooms and showers. We are opening those up. Just know everything else is going to be closed. So if they have a basketball court, if they have, you know, a playground, if they have a pool, all that's going to be closed. If they have a little store, we're going to encourage them to we're going to encourage that to be curbside pickup, or, you know, obviously fall under the retail guidelines. But campgrounds are open subject to a 50% capacity. State campgrounds, on the other hand, are taking a slower approach. And those should be opening up sometime in June, whether that's early to mid to late June. I don't have a great feel for it. That's run by the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. But, you know, they're sitting back and trying to understand, well, you know, we have all these campgrounds across the state. You know, there's an intense cleaning regimen that has to go on in these bathrooms multiple times a day. A lot of PPE that is required, keeping your employees safe. So it's not easy for these campgrounds just to open up. So I think some probably aren't open up yet, even though they're private, and some in the state is really coming up with a plan to ensure they can open them in a safe way.
Okay. can I give, this kind of falls outside of most of the industry things that are on the website. Can I give music or art lessons in person as long as there's less than 5 people in the group, including me? So teaching and schooling, like, is not really listed.
Yeah. So a couple things here. The essential and the non-essential business list has an exemption for things that aren't happening at your place of business, but rather a customer's home. So if you are a music teacher and you're an art teacher and you want to go to your customer's home to teach them music or to teach them art, you would be allowed to do that at this time. The other thing is we're basically a catch-all outdoors is one-on-one training. So I understand it might not fit perfectly, but if you have an art student or you have a music student and you can both be outside one-on-one, you would be allowed to do that. Having them come to your place of business and opening up, I don't think we're allowing that at this time.
Okay. Do you have any idea when outdoor sports will be allowed, like softball team sports instead of individual things?
Yep. So the governor did announce this yesterday that we will be allowing some outdoor sports in phase 2. We should have an update for what those are, what it looks like, and how it's going to work over the next 10 days. That's my job to kind of start working on that over the next 10 days or so. And then basically once we have a good idea, we run it through the public health team, and we have a rules committee that signs off on it and makes sure everything is happening the right way. So, like I said, by next Friday, hopefully we will have another announcement on which sports and how they're allowed to operate.
Okay, so the announcement is going to be next Friday, not necessarily opening it up. Okay. And this
tentatively, it'll be next Friday.
This question is kind of similar to the last two combined. So in my church, we have a choir. Can the choir actually sing together or practice, or the children's band or orchestra, can they practice and do things together? So I think the answer is no.
It's right. Strict social gathering limits to 5 people. We actually have an entire separate kind of group working on churches. We've been engaged with them for the past several weeks on what a reopening would look like, and there's discussions today on it. I'm not part of that group. There should be more guidance out there soon. I will say, from what I understand, some of these big churches out in the, I believe, Midwest, they had a choir singing, and because of that, they were they call them a super spreader event. So because they were singing and not wearing masks and kind of things were blowing around in the air, a lot of people in the church ended up getting very sick. But again, strict 5-person social gathering is going to be in effect throughout all of phase 1.
Okay. And I think you kind of mentioned that phase 2 might have 50 people, phase 3 maybe more, maybe 100 or something, because not everyone, caterers, wedding planners, event planners, nonprofits who rely upon large events for fundraising for their organizations are dying to know when we can open up. And I think there's another question down here about agricultural fairs and festivals and concerts. So those are thousands of people, so you got weddings and then at hundreds and festivals at thousands. Any chance that any of those festivals at thousands will open?
Yeah, the answer is I'm not sure, to be honest. We've actually already have engaged the Fair Association. Many, I think it might be close to half now, have voluntarily decided to not open up this year anyways without any kind of guidance. I believe that and a lot of this is outdoors, obviously, but I think the 50 rule is going to be outdoors. So it might not be the biggest wedding or the big wedding that you encourage, but if those things are allowed to happen, and that's an if because I have not seen what it says yet, then it would have to happen outdoors. I do believe I have heard that the Big E is planning on going forward this year, and there's ongoing conversations about what that looks like and how it will operate. But in this phase, at least phase 1, and what we'll be looking at over the next couple weeks is, are we comfortable with some of these other fairs opening up? If you're a fair, typically, you're not doing that for huge profit margins. You're doing it for the community and because people love it. And the extra security, the extra PPE, the extra materials and cleaning materials, and hand sanitizer, once you start adding up all those extra costs with the understanding that you're going to have a reduced capacity limit, economically, it just might not make sense for you to do it, whether we allow you, whether it's allowed to happen at that time. So I know the fair owners are looking into this. Again, a lot of them have decided, and more to come over the next couple of weeks.
Okay, so that other question is, I don't know if you're from our region, but we have the most amazing farmers market in Coventry, and it's kind of like a mini fair, but farmers markets have been allowed to remain open. But
Yep.
What differentiates like a farmers market for essential food versus a farmers market that's almost like a fair, with vendor booths? How are you handling that?
The farmer markets are actually being, handled by the Department of Agriculture. Brian Hurlbert, the commissioner, he's been doing a fantastic job. They opened the one in Hartford at the Hartford market the other day. I went and grabbed flowers for Mom. It was fantastic. Most people were great and easy. Everyone wore masks. People were social distance. I'm not sure how those are going to be treated. I've heard of the Coventry Farmers Market. I've not yet been there before. Again, some of this is we're still working on it, and we're going to adjust it over time. But the important thing about a farmers market, as you mentioned, is that is for essential food, potentially, where a fair is more for fun and entertainment. So there is a difference between there. Some people do rely on those farmers markets for their meals every day versus a fair, which is more or less entertainment. So just the essential versus non-essential aspect of it does make them different.
Yeah, I think what the question is a lot of nonprofits have these vendor type events where the vendor comes, set their tent up. There's a bunch of vendors. Like in the Coventry Farmers Market, half of them are food, but half of them are not food. So there's people there that make jewelry, that make soap, that make other products. So if that's allowed because it's part of a farmer's market, would other vendor type events maybe be allowed if they operate in the same manner? And I don't think you have an answer, but maybe that's something you can take back to Dave and everyone at DECD, because they basically operate the same way. They're outdoors. The vendors have their own booths. You'd have to limit the number of people, do social distancing, only so many at each booth at a time, kind of thing, with masks and the whole works. But I mean,
it's a fair point.
I'm just gonna say, a farmer's market's
Absolutely.
limited only to the food products, or have they allowed, continue to do other things?
I'll have to look at the guidance to be honest with you. And again, that's Department of Agriculture. This might go back and we say absolutely. As a nonprofit, though, one of the things you're gonna have to understand is you're gonna have to somewhat be responsible for people coming, who's allowed. From my understanding, the Coventry Farmers Market is huge, and it's tough to potentially social distance at that. But I haven't been there, but some of these other precautions you can open up, but there is going to be costs associated with some of these other precautions that you're going to have to take if you do open up. But I don't have a great answer for these kind of outdoor fairs. Fair to me, I guess I was thinking more of a carnival ride, but I know like in West Hartford, they do one where they have little shops and stuff pop up. I can get you an answer on that pretty quickly. We are allowing flea markets to open up, just so you know, and yard sales. So if you're a flea market and you're opening up, you would just register as a retail, and you'd have to follow the retail rules. So potentially, if this is something a nonprofit wanted to do, you would have to register as a restaurant as a retail establishment and follow the retail rules. But more to come on that.
Okay. That would be a good thing, because a lot of the art organizations, they have art fairs and craft fairs. So again, each booth would be considered retail. So that would be great if you know that, because that might open up some of the fundraising ability for the nonprofit art organizations.
Yeah, and just so everyone knows, Liz Shapiro, she's the director of arts, culture, and museums for the state. She works in our department. We stay close on a lot of this stuff. So I will talk to her more about that and the commissioner going forward.
That would be great, because actually I work with Liz all the time too, through
okay.
another organization. So I know that was kind of a question, and I know a lot of the nonprofits would like to be able to do those kinds of events. So I'm going to assume that through DECD, you don't necessarily talk too much about vaccinations and things like that, right? We're doing opening. So phase
Sure.
one happened yesterday. Do you know the number and percentage of Connecticut businesses that were actually open yesterday?
I don't have the percentage, but the last I checked, which was, so I can't tell you that. I can tell you the self-certification number is over, I believe, 6,000 at this point.
Yeah.
I actually haven't looked, Diane, since our last webinar that I did earlier on Tuesday. But as of Tuesday, I believe there was right around 6,000. I can get to that very quickly after the call, and I do have to run in about 4 minutes at 12:30. I have another call, but happy to do some rapid fire or finish up.
There was like 1,300 restaurants. There was 2,756 liquor licenses that were applied for, you know, and that were opening, in 6,200 businesses is what I last had a couple days ago. So just for those people who wondered, that's about where we're at. I think people really were interested in phase 2 and 3, and you kind of talked about it, but we're looking at phase 2 maybe happening, do you know when?
June 20th is tentatively. Look, a lot of this is just going to absolutely depend on what happens over the next 2 or 3 weeks. If things are going great, I think June 20th will absolutely be locked in. If things aren't going great and they're starting to spike, it might get pushed out to July 1. I've been giving the range June 20th to July 1 basically to everyone. And if, again, things are going good, it'll be potentially earlier. If things are going late, it'll be later.
I think that's fair. And if everything goes perfectly, let's say June 20th. And then if everything goes perfectly, phase 3 might be July?
I can tell you, I have the presentation yesterday from the governor's press conference, and it says at least 4 weeks later, I believe, at least. So it could be, I mean, phase 3, you know, what we're talking about are the big stuff where there's going to be a lot of people. There's going to be, you know, very close contact, bars, indoor event spaces. You know, I can say 4 weeks now. It might be 8 weeks. It might be, all of this is going to depend on what the data that comes out after phase 1. We'll see. We'll open phase 2. We'll wait and we'll see. And when we think it's safe based on the data to start opening up these bigger events, then that'll happen. But to give you an arbitrary date right now just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
I agree. I think we all have to be very flexible and see how things go. My last question, because I have like 1 minute, is what if I don't follow the guidelines? What can happen to me?
Yep. So we did put a complaint process in place, and that's available at ct.gov/coronavirus for either customers or employees to complain if the rules aren't being followed, or just the general public. Typically, what I think you'll see is happen, whether you're a restaurant or a salon or a retail store, it might depend on kind of who's enforcing those. But, I think you'll see potentially a warning first. So, a police officer or a public health official shows up, they say, hey, we got a complaint. They visibly see that complaint is still happening. They say, you guys got to fix that. Otherwise, we're going to shut you down. And then from there, there is going to be some, there's ability to take it further. I don't think anybody's goal is to shut these restaurants down. But if you do not follow the rules, you can get shut down. Or right now it's up to $1,000 fine and misdemeanor summons. That has not happened across the state throughout. And this was the same. It's the same thing for the essential businesses or non-essential businesses operating at the beginning. It's kind of always been the same, and we have not used it. Most people, actually, I guess all of them, if there's a complaint, there's a few stories about bars and restaurants I think down in Fairfield County, but, police show up, whoever shows up, they get a warning, and there's no more issues going forward. So I'm assuming, go ahead.
Yeah, this is using the 211 system.
Correct. Yeah, and I think 211 is going to point you, we changed it a little bit. There's a form on the website now that you would go and fill out. So, depending on, 211 is really to figure out what the complaint is and then where to direct you. So some of the stuff might go to federal OSHA, some of it might go to Connecticut OSHA, some of it, you might have to fill out that online form and it'll get routed to a local authority. So 211 is if you don't really know what the complaint is and where to direct it. But they're going to tell you the best way to move forward with that complaint.
So where's the online form? It's on DECDs?
I believe it's ct.gov/coronavirus.
Okay. All right, I'll check into that and send that out to everybody. I'll send that out to everybody. All right. Well, I think I will say, I'll add a comment versus a question, that a lot of businesses were concerned about the complaint process and false complaints made against them, because when the
Yeah,
systems open up to do ratings of different, especially restaurants, right? Competitors were going on
yeah,
there and doing reviews that were negative. So people were very concerned about people just making false, erroneous complaints. And what is the government going to do to make sure that that doesn't happen and somebody gets shut down just because he has a disgruntled employee?
gotcha. Yeah, and you know, some of this would be like any other restaurant. If this is happening, you know, outside the virus versus now, you know, if your competitor is sitting there calling the police saying, you know, all right, I understand that these infractions are different, but you know, the local authorities, you know, I believe they've received some sort of information on this, and they should be able to help out there. You know, if the complaint is this horrible thing and the police show up and you know, nothing's really going on, I don't think, you know, I think the police are professionals, and they will understand quickly whether or not this is real or fake. And that's just my own personal opinion.
I have to agree. Like I said, even police officers have family members that own businesses. So they're human too. And we have to,
Yeah.
we really have to give them our trust. Well, I want to
Yeah.
thank you very much, Tommy, for giving us an hour of bombarding you with questions one after another. I think that we answered
Happy to do it.
everybody's questions on the calls, and those questions we got ahead of time. And this has been extremely informative. I think overall, the thing is 6 feet from everybody, wear a face mask, clean, wash, disinfect everything that anybody touches, and you should be okay.
Yep, and thank you, Diane, Steve, and everyone else for listening. And Diane, any other questions? Diane has my email, and she's not afraid to use it. So I get plenty of questions, and I'm pretty good about answering them very quickly. So thank you again, everyone. Hope this was helpful and informative, and maybe we'll have to do it again after phase 2 or something like that.
That would be wonderful. I would love to have you back. And it's 2 days before a holiday weekend. So everybody have a safe, fun weekend. It's supposed to be nice and sunny and warm weather. Enjoy your families and enjoy being outside. So thank you again for coming. Windham Chamber of Commerce welcomes, wishes you all the best and a happy holiday. Happy Memorial Day. Thank you, Tommy.
Take care.